All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sasha Beatty, and I'm General Counsel at the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. APA is a private nonprofit located in Washington, D.C., serving prosecutors as well as their law enforcement and community partners. So, thank you all for joining today's webinar, AI and Justice, made possible by Axon, who will be presenting this webinar today. Points of view or opinions in this presentation are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the views of the APA. Now, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in and introduce our speakers. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, such as trouble with sound, connectivity, please use the chat feature and one of us will assist you. If you have a question for our presenters today, feel free to use the Q&A feature. It should be at the top right of your screen and look like a little box with a question mark in it, and you can submit your feel free to use the Q&A feature at the top right of your screen to ask questions of our presenters. You can also toggle captions if you wish. They should be located at the bottom right of your screen. And finally, please keep your phones handy as this is an interactive session, so keep them nearby. All right, so we are honored to be joined by our speakers today from Axon. First, I'd love to introduce Brent Berkeley, who is the Strategic Relationships Director at Axon. Brent is an internationally recognized expert on criminal justice and the prosecutorial function. Over his nearly 35-year career, he has served as a defense attorney, a prosecutor at every level of government, and a consultant and educator for justice professionals around the world. At Axon, he founded the Axon Justice Team and now works with justice leaders to modernize criminal justice practice for the 21st century. Joining him is Justin Dilley, Senior Director of Product at Axon. Justin leads product strategy for emerging markets, focusing on innovative technologies that enhance public safety and justice systems. With over 17 years of experience in product and technical leadership at companies like Amazon, the Home Depot, and Full Story, Justin brings a wealth of experience in building impactful and scalable solutions. And so with that, I will now turn it over to our presenters. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and good afternoon, or probably afternoon for most of you. It's morning for me. My name is Brent Berkeley, Strategic Relationships Director here at Axon. It is always a pleasure to join my friends and colleagues at APA. I've worked with APA for many years over my career, and very happy that we've been invited to join you today. Before I kick it over to Justin for a little bit of introduction, I do want to say I am on the road today, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm in a hotel in Arizona, and the Wi-Fi is somewhat sketchy here. And so if I happen to disappear during the webinar, I apologize. I'll be back as soon as I can, but you'll be in good hands with Justin. So with that in mind, before we dive into it, I'll turn it over to Justin for just a moment.
Yeah, appreciate it, Brent. I appreciate the introduction, Sasha. It's great to meet everybody. It's great to get a chance to talk to the APA group here as well. As Sasha mentioned, I am the leader of our suite and portfolio of products here focused on our justice customers. So really excited today to talk to you about some key trends that we see in the industry and some of the things that are really influencing how we think about building products for prosecutors as well.
Absolutely. All right. So just a couple of things to get started. We want to go over very quickly, sort of the agenda here. And first and foremost, this is not a sales pitch. We're not here to sell you anything that Axon provides. We do provide a wealth of solutions for prosecutors. And as much as we would love for you to buy our stuff, that's not the purpose of the webinar today. But we are here to talk about some trends, some concerns, some excitements, and some opportunities that artificial intelligence provides to the criminal justice practitioner today. And so what we're going to talk in a big way about is a survey that we recently sponsored, and we sent it out through APA as well as through the National Association of Public Defense, because we wanted a big, broad, good cross section of criminal justice practitioners to sort of let us know and to inform each other about what the trends, concerns, and issues are surrounding artificial intelligence. Because if you think back, if we can sort of take a step back into history a couple of years, really only maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, whenever the topic was breached or came up about what's the future of AI, in criminal justice legal practice. The common response and the common conversation was, "But yeah, it's coming, and we know it will be here someday." But that someday was sort of in everybody's mind of being 5 years, maybe 10 years down the road, because just didn't have a good sense that AI was anywhere where it needed to be really efficacious within criminal justice practice. And then about a year ago, literally everything changed practically overnight. And there's a couple of sort of nerdy background reasons for that in relating to the efficiency, the cost, the speed, and the accuracy of various AI models. And then all of a sudden, there's just a massive explosion in AI tools within criminal justice. So it was literally here before we knew it, at least sort of complex and really effective AIs. And honestly, we've been using AIs for decades, at least primitive ones, spell check, grammar check, predictive text, all of the various algorithms on our phones, from Instagram to YouTube to you name it. So AI has been a big part of our lives. But how we can use it within criminal justice practice is relatively new. So we're going to talk about this survey and the methodology, and hopefully this will sort of sort of trigger some conversations, some questions, and some thoughts in your mind as you're sort of developing the policies and the practical considerations of utilizing AI in your office. Because as much as we love AI as a company, Axon has gone all in on AI. We recognize that it is still relatively new, and there's some questions. This is a pivotal, I think this is a key moment within criminal justice that is going to dramatically change the way that we practice law. And so there should be questions asked, there should be concerns, and there should be those that are saying, hey, slow down or speed up, so that we can come to a consensus about how we use these very vital and very important tools in the appropriate and ethical way. So this is just not going to read through the agenda here, but this is just essentially what we're going to talk about. But primarily we want to talk about kind of the methodology behind this survey and what those results were. So Justin?
And Brent and I are going to try to do a little bit of an Abbott and Costello routine here. Brent has a ton of practical experience out as a former prosecutor and defender, and so he's going to kind of add in some of the color commentary. I'll take us and steer us through a bit of the presentation and slides here, but hopefully we can make this a little bit of a less traditional webinar where Brent and I are up here just talking at you guys. And as Brent mentioned, feel free to drop some questions in the chat or in the questions feature, and we'll try and either pull them into the presentation or answer them at the end. And so we'll for sure be ready and willing to answer questions and leave a little bit of time at the end. But as Brent mentioned, the focus for this webinar is on this trend survey that we've done for the last several years here at Axon. And here's a little bit about our methodology. We had 382 respondents really across a wide cross-section of users and personas and types of folks, both Axon customers and non-Axon customers, both APA members and NAPD members. We ran this survey earlier this year. And so this data and these results are really fresh, and we think give a really good perspective of where prosecutors and defenders are at as they're thinking about AI. And so we have a number of roles here, from your traditional kind of ADA to investigators, to paralegals, to administrators. And so what we really want you to walk away from is, when we're talking about some of this data, hopefully it really does resonate with you and how you might be feeling. But if for whatever reason it doesn't, it's a good opportunity to start a conversation. Brent mentioned being at kind of an inflection point, and hopefully this webinar and some of this content can help spur some further conversations to ultimately navigate us to the right approach, because I think some of the challenges that y'all are dealing with that AI could potentially be really beneficial for are very real, and we want to have some conversations about those. But there's certainly some apprehension there, and I think that is all valid too, and we should be willing and able to talk about that. And as Brent mentioned, Axon is kind of all in on AI, and so it's really relevant for us to listen to you all and what's happening in your worlds as well.
And just
And so,
sort of a
yeah, jump in,
quick
Brent.
little note. Sorry, Justin.
No, no.
On the methodology, we wanted to try to make sure that we were getting a really broad cross section on that, because as you look at sort of the workload that has dramatically increased over the course of my career over the last 35 years or so, where we went from an entirely analog and paper environment for reviewing, handling, managing, and prosecuting cases. Different you know, technological advances, which we think are very important. From body cameras and additional data that's gathered by law enforcement, and even within the community with like Ring cameras and CCTV. While that provides a much more robust definition and sort of vision of what the truth of a particular incident was, that has fundamentally increased the amount of workload that is placed on everybody that's involved in the prosecutorial function. And so we specifically sought out users at every level of that, both from city prosecutor offices, AGs and DAs or prosecuting attorneys, and then also within those individual offices, the different roles within that. So your paralegals, the folks that are working to prepare and research, investigators, as well as those trial lawyers, because different tools are going to be used at different times by these different folks within your office. And we want to make sure that we are providing the proper impact, across that spectrum of users.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the core problems and challenges that most offices and most agencies, and probably everybody that is live and will ultimately watch the recording of this webinar. I think the one thing that we consistently hear when we're out in the field talking with folks, and I think it comes through very clearly here as a part of these survey results, is that most agencies are dealing with some pretty significant staffing issues. If you look at the data here, 40% of respondents say their agency is only operating at about an 80% capacity or even lower. And so, we see this as being a huge challenge and, potential opportunity with AI as well. But as folks will probably tell you in every office, there continues to be more cases and more digital evidence to review. And when you're consistently understaffed, you're constantly in this reactive firefighting mode, and a lot of your time is spent on things that may not be that you may not think are valuable to contributing to the overall justice system. And certainly tools and technology can be a helpful component to that, but there's also some deeper issues here as well. And so I think this is just a good highlighting of hopefully how everybody feels, so everybody can be heard here. And we see this as a really exciting opportunity and challenge in the marketplace for folks like Axon to really help up level and make customers and users just even more efficient and effective with the already limited time that they have.
Yeah. And to add to that, like Justin was saying, is that while many offices are also, sort of like, historically understaffed, and they continue to be, there's more and more data that's coming in, and that necessitates a greater amount of, I don't want to call it administrative work, but it's sort of that sorting, the analyze, the finding the right piece sort of thing, because what your attorneys, what your paralegals, what your investigators are really good at is putting all those pieces together and analyzing that, and then being able to take the data that exists in this big mountain of information and condensing that into a legal argument in court. And we have found that what it used to be, sort of a small amount of sort of that preparatory work, and then a much larger amount of the actual advocacy. That advocacy time and the resources that you have to commit to, that full-on advocacy, the stuff we went to law school for, has been constricted tighter and tighter over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. And that has led to a huge level of frustration, a huge level of concern with being able to recruit and retain attorneys, because it's just like there's just so much busy work involved here before I can even get to making my arguments, writing my briefs, or presenting my case in court. So that's where we're hoping that AI is going to give us an opportunity to sort of rebalance that scale a little bit. So we're back to doing a higher percentage of the advocacy that is the true nature of what the prosecutorial function is.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of that in the survey results here. You know, Brent kind of mentioned the overall burden of administrative and discovery work, and you know, some of this is just really necessary, albeit time consuming. But you know, over half of folks are spending their week on administrative type tasks, which you know, as Brent mentioned, maybe isn't the best or most effective use of their time, and you know, getting back into more of that advocacy and you know working for the folks that are most important and serving the overall needs of the justice system. You know, time could potentially be better spent there. And then you know on the discovery side of the world, there is a lot of time being spent in just reviewing evidence and digital evidence in particular. You know, I don't know if you all feel the same thing, but we see this across all of our customers here. It's just the growing mountain of digital evidence. It feels like a hyperbolic hockey stick curve of evidence that is being collected across the ecosystem, and then ultimately sent for you guys to review. And so without the right tools and technology, it can take a lot of time to review this information. And again, as Brent mentioned, we think that you know there could be an opportunity for AI to step in here, and be able to play a pretty vital role. And again, freeing up some of that time and hopefully helping you be more efficient with your overall time.
Sure. And if we want to put this into a little, you know, sort of some on the ground perspective, and I tell this story a lot, but when I started as a prosecutor back in the early '90s, I worked for a city prosecutor's office, and my one of my primary responsibilities was every morning I had to review all of the new domestic assault cases that would come into our office, and there'd be a dozen or so. It wasn't a big office, but there'd be a dozen or so cases every morning, and the content involved in those cases was, you know, maybe a 1 or 2 page police narrative. If I was lucky, I had a victim witness impact statement. It was handwritten, and then I usually had a post-it note that said, "Your photos are at Photomat. They'll be back in a week." And that's just sort of the nature of the analog world. And even when I got those pictures back, because of the nature of film, and you know, you have a limited amount of photos that you could take, I would have maybe a dozen, maybe 20 pictures or something like that of injuries and things of that nature. I could review those dozen or so cases, you know, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock when I had to be in court for my docket without any problem. I could go through those, make a charging decision. Yes, no, need more information. This needs to go to the county because it's a, you know, it's a repeat offense kind of thing. And now if you take that exact same case, you've probably still got a dozen of those that show up on your desk every morning. Each one of those cases, you're going to have at least 2 officers present. So you might have 2 to 3 hours worth of body camera for each one. You've got interview room stuff. You've got maybe ring camera video. Maybe you've got screenshots of threatening text messages, voicemails, anything like that. So you may have what I used to have 30 something years ago, which was, you know, 5 minutes of content to review. You may now have 20 hours of content to review for that same dozen or more cases, but the amount of time you have hasn't changed. And so, while yes, all of that evidence is great, it's valuable, helps you present a better case in court. Just the amount of time that's available to get through that evidence, it just doesn't exist. And so, how can we make that? What tools are available to make that much more effective?
Yeah, it's a really tough time in a lot of ways to be to be a prosecutor right now, and so I know Brett and I empathize with a lot of the roles that you all have here, and I think hopefully there is a little bit of optimism towards where AI could go and the types of problems that AI could solve for prosecutors and the overall justice system. And we see this kind of duality of approach here, where there's some optimism and some hopefulness, but also some real hesitation towards what AI is and ultimately what it isn't. And so 60% of the respondents are feeling optimistic about AI, and 3 and 4 believe that it can help reduce the complexity and help better manage their cases, which is kind of the excitement side of the world. And so there's some really hope out there, but there's also a real concern about AI usage in justice. And you can see kind of the variety of concerns here around accuracy and bias and precision and potentially putting your job at risk, which I think are all very real and very valid concerns that as any office or any person thinks about leveraging AI today is going to be thinking about. And so companies like Axon and others that are out there developing AI related solutions are going to have to take this very seriously as well. And we want to continue to bring out the good things that exist in AI and helping solve some of these real big challenges that prosecutors and defenders have, but just being really cognizant out there that there's some real hesitation, and it's going to take some real work from everybody here to get to a place where we feel like we can fully embrace and trust the tools and technology that exist out there in the AI realm.
And let's also set a little bit of a, sort of a definition of kind of what Justin and I are talking about here is when we're talking about AI, tools for prosecutors and other criminal justice litigants, we're talking about tools that are there for you because there's a whole different discussion, which is not really the subject of this webinar, about AI that's being used by defendants, by the bad guys. And that could be, we see a lot of these sort of like AI generated text or email scams, or AI generated deep fake, CSAM content or something like that, or even deep fake phone calls or videos or something along those lines. And being able to identify sort of bad actors' use of AI, that's a whole different concern, whole different topic that is equally as important and something that we are also working on. But what we're really talking about here in this is like, what are the tools that AI can use to actually actively help you as a prosecutor do your job more effectively, more efficiently, and more fairly?
Let's talk about some AI tools that are really already in use. I know we talk about AI a lot as an industry, as something that is really brand new. A lot of the zeitgeist of things like Chat GPT, I think, have thrusted the concept of AI into everybody's worlds in a rather unique and truly innovative way. And I think there are a number of brand new AI tools and technology, especially when you start to think about the suite of things for generative AI specifically. But there's already a lot of existing tools that have been taking advantage of some flavor of AI for the past several years, and so there's some really tangible benefits that respondents mentioned here that they're already getting from existing tools and technology that are leveraging AI. So, we saw in the responses from folks across the ecosystem here that 54% of respondents are already using some of Axon's AI tools, including things like auto transcription and our redaction capabilities. And you're telling us that is already saving you about 1 day a week in being able to review transcriptions and potentially body-worn camera evidence, or really anything with an audio transcription, even faster, to be able to quickly redact videos for FOIA requests. So just to be able to get an hour back every day is a real tangible benefit that AI is already delivering to folks today, even though you might not necessarily think about it as what you might see kind of in the news and in the press and what you hear every day around some of the new tools and technology related to AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping that, sort of new tools that we, and, like Justin said, we're not the only vendor in the space. There are others that are doing it as well. But if we can find a way to sort of, go from just 1 day a week that we're saving, as far as from, sort of the repetitive sort of like non-advocacy work, if we could start to save, maybe 2 days, that's just going to fundamentally and exponentially sort of improve your effectiveness as an advocate, and help you to better represent your client, which is, the community in which you serve. And if we can provide that tool. Now, there are definitely some safeguards that you have to make sure you've got in place. We'll talk about those a little bit later when we talk about sort of what our AI ethical framework is, as well as sort of the ethical and practical concerns that you should look at before you implement any in any AI tools within your office, but the idea is like how can we further contribute to an efficient administration of justice?
And I know, Brett, you usually have a really good story around this, or around kind of how folks might already be using AI, but maybe not necessarily realizing that they're using
Oh,
AI kind of in their everyday life. Certainly products inside of the work arena as well as outside of work.
oh, absolutely. And you know, granted, Justin and I, we work in the AI field, so, we might use it a little bit more than normal, but I would dare say that all of us on this call have interacted with AI at some point. In fact, if you've turned on the captions for this webinar, you're interacting with AI today. Um, and, when I wake up in the morning, I probably got 100 different AI tools on my phone right here, and we all do. And it's everything from spell check, which is AI. It's a very primitive AI. Predictive text, autocorrect, all of those things that we've been using sometimes to sort of, humorous results. It's like, I don't know how often I actually want to write the word duck, but my phone writes the word duck fairly regularly. Um, and then also, it's like I'm 56 years old, and I think I'm pretty relatively well educated. I can't spell the word friend to save my life. And so if you ever get an email or a text or anything from me where the word friend is spelled properly, it's because AI, a primitive AI tool, has auto-corrected or helped me to spell the word friend right. It's just something that I have. It's a block. And so we interact with those tools that are also very efficient. Yet at the same time, we're also interacting with any number of other platforms that are out there, and the algorithms that those platforms use to feed us content that we want to see is based on artificial intelligence. And I've noticed recently how much this has dramatically improved when you just look at the YouTube algorithm. So YouTube, we all know, has an algorithm. It's based on what we watch, how long we watch it, what we like, what we dislike, and it's going to feed us different content related to that. What I have noticed over the last couple of months is that my YouTube app will feed me different suggestions based on the time of day. Um, it knows when I wake up that there's a certain thing, it's news and things like that. So I'm going to get the various news channels that I watch. It's going to feed me those. Later in the afternoon, it's stuff related to my nerdy hobbies. I'm a beekeeper and things like that. So it'll feed me that information. And then at night, if I open my phone and open YouTube right around when I'm going to bed, it's going to feed me white noise videos because it knows that every night around that time I want to listen to like spaceship sounds or something. So it has been able to sort of precision hone its algorithm based on my activity to give me different recommendations during the day. So we all interact with it. And honestly, that makes my life a lot easier. I don't have to search for white noise, at night because it just pops up right there. And how can we bring that same concept, the same idea of giving us, a more efficient, more effective, more customized life? How can we bring that to work? We get a lot of people that I've heard this a lot. It's like, I live in 2025 in my personal life, and when I go to work, I step back to 1998. And how can we fix that? How can we bridge that technical gap from what we're used to in our day-to-day lives to what we have access to when we're at work?
Brett, I can't wait for that beekeeper AI mashup video that you're probably going to get fed here next, as
Yeah,
we've been talking about both things.
definitely.
And okay, so as we think about, we're probably using AI in our everyday lives, but AI's ideal role really is centered around as an assistant, not a decision maker. I mean, 62% of the respondents mentioned and believe that AI should ultimately be assistive in helping humans and people make decisions, not necessarily replacing it. And y'all can read the quote on the page here, but I think this does bring together a really strong perspective that everybody that responded to the survey, as well as I think what Brett and I feel pretty strongly about as well, is that AI is a really strong, powerful assistant, something that you can keep attached at the hip and have, effectively a research assistant, a generative image assistant, someone to talk with. But ultimately, it's your roles as prosecutors to overlook what the assistant does and to guide and shape the approach that that assistant takes in terms of how you might think about organizing data or identifying patterns or bias, or as Brett mentioned, coming up with some of those difficult charging decisions. And so AI can be really helpful in surfacing some of this, but it really is not meant to replace it in any way. And so as we think about this, and certainly as you all think about this, is that AI's ideal role, it really is as an assistant, not as a decision maker.
Yeah, and think about it from the perspective of, and just sort of like one use of AI, because AI is really good at managing massive amounts of data. It doesn't, it's not to say that a human couldn't do that. If you've got a gigabyte worth of, data that you have to sort through, could you get through all of it? Yes, you could. But how much time would that take, and how much mental power would that take? And, how do you sort of sort and analyze and find what it is you're actually looking for? And that's just one of the components that I think is, probably on the immediate horizon. It's like here now to use is sort of finding that needle in a haystack. I always think it's funny. So I worked for a long time in a very rural area. I've never actually in my life seen an actual haystack. I've seen hay bales, I've seen hay rolls, but I've never seen an actual stack. But nevertheless, if you're looking for a needle in that haystack, which I get is somewhat cliche, but I think the cliche is appropriate here. AI can sort of sort through all of that haystack and say, here's a needle. It's not going to tell you this is the needle that you absolutely need. This is the one that's going to make the appropriate, stitch to bind the pieces of your cases together. It's like, here's a needle. And it's your job as a prosecutor, paralegal, investigator to say, yes, that's the needle that works for me, or no, it's not. It's like, okay, that's a needle. It's too fine. It's too big, whatever. Next. And say, okay, well, here's these other 4 needles that I found in this massive haystack. And you say, this is the one I need. And this is the one that's going to help me stitch together my case. That's still going to be your responsibility. We don't ever want to hand over the responsibility to an unfeeling machine that says this is the only needle that you need for your case, because you might need 5, you might need a dozen, you might only need 1. And that's your role and to apply your education, your training, your experience, your empathy, to apply all of that to making sure that you've got just the right needle.
Yeah, totally spot on there, Brent. And then, so if you think about AI as much more of an assistant than a replacement for decision making, what are some of the current value drivers that you all mentioned, and that I think we pretty consistently see? And it seems like there really is far and away one category or classification of things that you associate with as a primary benefit of using AI as an assistant. And so 80% of folks cite faster evidence review as the top potential benefit of AI. Of course, there's other things as well, as around being able to better use your resources, some deeper case insights, and cost savings. But I think being able to help prosecutors efficiently review evidence, especially the growing mountain of digital evidence, and you combine that with some of the staffing challenges that we talked about earlier in the presentation, and it certainly feels like AI could really be ripe for innovation in this space, as an assistant, as somebody helpful, as Brett mentioned, to find the needle in the needle stack or in the haystack, and then being able to allow you to make kind of the right decisions on what to do with that. It's a really exciting time and opportunity out there for folks like Axon as well as the rest of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of there's a broad spectrum of what AI can do. I also think there's a broad spectrum of what it can't do, or more likely what it shouldn't do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But looking at things like how can we get deeper case insights? If you're looking at a case, let's say you have a case that gets presented to you for for screening for charging, and it involves a pretty serious offense. Maybe there's a shooting at a convenience store. The way that tends to work is that you'll have your first responders, and then you might have 30 or 40 officers show up. And so you get that case sent to you, and it's in your evidence.com, it's in your Axon Justice solution, and you have like this massive list of like 34-hour long body cameras to look at. And they're all titled something like Axon Body 4-2025-0701, something like that. It's like doesn't really give you insight as to which of those you have to look at. If you've got 36-hour videos and you've got to make a charging decision in 72 hours, there's more than 72 hours of content to get through. And so what AI can do is actually summarize, the content of those. So you can say, all right, these 15 officers, they were the ones that were stringing the yellow tape, and they were directing traffic and, that kind of thing. These 5 officers, these are the ones who, collected the evidence, helped transport the victim, made the arrest, interrogated the suspect. These are the 5 videos that I need to watch now. The others, I'll watch them later when I need to, but these are the ones I have to do now. So it creates that triage capacity for you, rather than just sitting there staring at this big long list of body camera video or interview video or photos. This is going to help you narrow yourself in and say, okay, these are the ones I have to listen to now. These others I'll get to when I have time, but I have to watch these. And so being able to have that assistant to be able to say, here's what this video is about. Whether it's the most important video, don't know, but this is what happens in this one.
Yeah, it's spot on, Brent. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the AI as an assistant, I think there's very clear some opportunities there to help out the legal system and help out the overall justice system. But there's some real significant concerns around accuracy and bias. 60 to 70% of respondents lack confidence in AI's accuracy for things like transcription, redaction, and image recognition. 84% are concerned about using AI generated information and court. And there's a real fundamental lack of trust around AI that isn't necessarily tied to some of the technology, although that could be at the heart of it a bit. But there is some real risks around fairness and bias and ethics that as an industry, and certainly as a company who's developing products in this space, hasn't quite made the leap over yet. And I think it's this confidence here and the lack of trust that needs to really be thought through. And folks like Brent and I and Axon in general are working together with our customers to be able to get over this. But this is a real concern for most folks here. And there's, I think, just a lot of opportunity for us to work together to address this, because there is such a big opportunity in front of us to help out with some of the things that we've already talked about.
Yeah, and I think this is where we really start to get into the meat of the discussion about how do you actually implement these tools in your office, and what tools do you use, or which tools do you use? Because if you look at something that's sort of a generally available artificial intelligence large language model tool, a GPT, like a Chat GPT or Gronk or Copilot, any of those number of other, AI tools that are out there, a couple of concerns about sort of like accuracy and bias is that a big chunk of those, or all of those, are essentially trained on all of the information that's on the internet, right? And that's how they train those models to sort of look for, which is why you get sort of a couple of years ago, somebody asked the Google AI, how do I keep the toppings on my pizza? And the Google AI recommended that they use glue. Because that would keep the toppings on your pizza. Yeah, sure, that's going to keep the pepperoni on your pizza, but you certainly don't want to eat it. So it's just because if there's something that's out there, it's not curated, it's not fact checked, it's not determined to be accurate, and that's just kind of the nature of those. And and they are much better. They continue to improve as they sort of kind of crowdsource the accuracy, checking on these sorts of things. But you need to sort of take a look at what are the models that you're using, what are the GPTs that you're using, how are they trained, what is the source of that training information that's out there, and then also where is the GPT pointed. So if you're like, hey, I need you to tell me all of the information that is contained in this video, where is it pointed? Is it pointed just at the video, or is it also allowed to go out to the internet to make assumptions and extrapolations on the data in the video based on what it's cross-referencing on the internet? And I don't think it should come as a surprise. And so that shouldn't be the case, right? They shouldn't be sort of looking outside the four corners of your evidence. It should be in a very contained environment. Because these generalized AIs like ChatGPT and Copilot and others, they're for general use. I use them to, what's the best recipe for this? How can I, you know, you know, do something for my bees or my garden or something along those lines, and it's going to go out and fill all that information. I still have to sort through it, but I want much more control and much more specificity and a much more closed environment if I'm using that for information that is, CGIS, restricted, that is confidential, that may have an impact on the fairness of the tribunal or on the safety of my victim or my witnesses or my officers. So you need to be very careful and put every vendor that you go to for an AI tool to the test about where your data goes, where their models were trained on, and what the sort of data protection plan is, whether it's Axon or anybody else. And if we can't answer the questions to your satisfaction, then it's not time to buy.
Yeah, I totally agree, Brent. And part of the starting point for us here at Axon, and it really is a starting point for us to address, certainly some of the bias and accuracy that concerns that exist out there in the marketplace today, is centered around what we call our responsible innovation and AI approach here at Axon. I'll let Brent you go through each of these, but really this is kind of the cornerstone for how we think about improving accuracy and reducing bias in the products and services that we develop and build here at Axon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, y'all can read this, and this is, prominently displayed on our website. And this is absolutely something that we take very serious here. And to add another layer to this, one thing that Axon implemented a number of years ago was an Equity and Ethics Advisory Council, which is an independent board that reviews the innovation and future developments that we do at Axon through the lens of how is this going to impact not just the company and the bottom line, but also our customers and the communities that they serve, including underserved populations. So it's like, what is this? What is the impact of this? And in AI, because of the risks of bias and things like that, they look very closely at that. So we've developed these sort of responsible innovation tenets about ethics first. I mean, we could probably innovate much faster, and we could probably come up with some really cool stuff that may or may not fit within the ethics that Axon has. And so we're going to look at how does this impact the community, not just today, but what are the potential downstream impacts that we might 2, 5, 10 years down the road. And we're going to make sure that we're doing everything we can to improve efficiency and effectiveness while mitigating any potential risk for your communities. We also want to be very collaborative. We tend, in sort of the tech business, we tend to get in our little insular ivory towers and think that we know everything, and we're so excited and impressed by our innovation and our smartness. But we tend to forget that we're making tools for people that are going to be using this every day in, day out, every day. And so we want your input. We do have a customer advisory board. We bring in, thought leaders and users from, a broad section of the community. And we want your input as well. If you're using one of our tools and you see something that, you don't like, whether it's, the feature just doesn't work, or whether it's like, hey, I have a concern about this. There's an ethical issue with, the use of this. We would like to know that, because maybe we just missed it. We do our best to make sure that we're getting it right. But sometimes, obviously, mistakes can be made. So we want to be collaborative with you and everybody within, the potential user space. And then we also want to be transparent and promote transparency and accountability so that you know how the tools work, where the data is, what we're doing with the data, if anything, and how that could work. And then from
Yeah,
just from go ahead, Justin. Yep.
no. I was just gonna kind of reinforce everything that you said, Brent. As somebody that is, building products every day that has some sort of AI component in it. I mean, our team is consistently and constantly working with our ethics board, and they are influencing and changing the direction in some cases of our product development approach. And so this is really something that is not only just kind of words on a screen or on this slide here, but it is something that we are living every day and is interwoven into the fabric of how we build products, and certainly how my team builds products for the justice system.
Yeah, for sure. And on the AI specific sort of ethics guidelines that we have, we've already talked about bias mitigation, and one thing that we will provide with you in addition to the survey results, we'll send that out to all of the attendees. Also send out a white paper that Axon did for one particular AI product, Draft One, which is our police narrative tool. Before we released it, we had an independent study done about bias mitigation. We're really proud of the results of that, so we'll send that out as well. But two very key components is it needs to be mission aligned. There's a lot of cool AI tools out there that you can use to say, generate an image that looks like me, but I'm a superhero. And those are cool. I do that. Um, but it's not mission aligned. We don't need that, as cool as it would be for every prosecutor to be superhero. That's not something we're going to do. So we're looking at what is the mission of public safety in the criminal justice system, and how can we generate tools or develop tools that are aligned with that mission to move that mission forward. And then probably the most important thing is human in the loop. We don't ever want to turn over a consequential decision to an unfeeling machine, right? The human needs to do that. The one whose bar license is on the line, whose job is on the line, and whether or not they win or lose this case is on the line. That's the entity that should be making that decision, assisted by AI, but the human is the one. And I think human in the loop isn't strong enough. I think it's like human behind the wheel is the one that is making that decision.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brent. Okay, we talked a lot about in this presentation some of like the high level quantitative, more macro analysis, which I think is really helpful to try and guide and shape the overall conversation. But we tried to pull in some more of the qualitative feedback that we got from respondents, which hopefully kind of hits home and adds a little bit of texture and flavor to some of the things that we talked about here today. And so pulled up some of these, qualitative responses from folks. This is kind of on the positive side of the world. And I think if you pick through some of these quotes, it's very clear that folks believe that AI can help out with some of those repetitive, time consuming, potentially lower value tasks. And those are things that maybe computers can be really, really good at with a strong assisted focus and human in the loop, or as Brett mentioned, human in control. And so being able to summarize materials, being able to automate administrative tasks can ultimately really free up folks to focus on some of the higher value things when it comes to running a number of cases or managing a number of pieces of digital evidence that they have to review. And so reducing that overall time feels like it could be a huge benefit for folks.
Yeah, exactly. And if we can just make it more efficient, more effective, get you to where you are spending more of your time applying sort of that analysis to it, then we've hit our goal at that point.
And then, of course, on the negative side, here as well, there is still a lot of skepticism and a really strong lack of trust related to AI here, and I think that comes through not only in the quantitative data, but in some of these qualitative results. We spent a lot of time talking about accuracy and bias, and I really like this last sentence in this first quote here that I think speaks to a bit of the accuracy, where folks refer to AI as like the world's dumbest intern. And since a human being's life is at stake and a computer with no soul should not be making decisions. I think these are real concerns and things that ultimately have to be addressed before folks will trust things like AI, and bias, mistakes, and sloppiness actually make your lives harder. And if the opposite is supposed to be true, and that these tools should be making your lives easier and more efficient, if you don't trust them, or if they're not as accurate as they should be or claim to be, then you ultimately end up spending more time. And I think what's pretty clear from the data is that time is really, really precious, and getting smaller by the day. Okay, this is kind of was more of a general question that we asked, and this is some of kind of the open-ended feedback that folks gave us around AI. So we asked for some kind of positives and some negatives, and then just more of like an open-ended question, and wanted to pull in some of the interesting results. If we were going to try and summarize all of this into one nice, neat slide, on the positive side, AI is here. It is here, and it is now, and it is also the future. And so that should feel at least a little bit exciting. But also, AI is bad everywhere, and especially in justice. And I think there is a long way to go before we get to a point where AI is trusted like some other tools and technology out there. And then if you kind of split the difference, maybe at a little bit in the middle, and kind of a moderated approach to how you might think about AI, and that folks want to see this implemented, but are very passive and concerning and questioning there. So, thinking about taking this to trial, thinking about sharing some of this information with defense, there's a real trepidation there, but maybe we can get to a point where it's more helpful than it is potentially hurtful. And this is an ever evolving and expanding space, and a lot of this is moving at lightning speed, and keeping up with it is difficult. And so it makes sense that we want to be slower and measured when it comes to leveraging AI, even if we all see the benefits of it. And we want to move forward in a way that feels right, that feels ethical, that feels justified, which I think means moving maybe at a little slower pace than what you might see out in like a more traditional consumer business.
Right. Let's see. Where are we on the slide? We've got a couple of questions here that have
Yep.
come in, and I apologize. For some reason, they weren't visible to me for a while. I was trying to sort of keep an eye on them, and they didn't show up until just now. So I apologize for that. So let's just kind of real quickly go through this, and then I think the sort of the survey, the interactive part of this is like maybe the next slide or something like that. So
Yep.
these are
Yep.
some of the things that we have seen, our customers tell us specifically, things like instant translations, faster evidence reviews, summarization case materials, reducing paperwork. And then, this is a big one that we're not quite there yet as far as like being able to, to offer something through Axon, is the identification of deepfakes and this auto metadata import that's, I think, very separate from deepfake analysis. But these are what we're hearing. It's like this is what we've got. So, Justin, if you want to pop up the next slide, which has this thing, we're really big at Axon and the Slido, which is basically scan that or go to slido.com. That's the code for this particular webinar. It's got some questions that we just sort of like your response on. And while we do that, I'm going to try to get through some of these questions to answer this and see what we've got. So one of the questions is, what are the languages that Axon can translate? So it sort of depends on, which tool you're using, and we're getting ready to release a few others. So we've got an evidence translation tool. which will translate, I believe it's like 57 languages. Some of the more common ones that you're going to run into in the United States, certainly some of the more niche or less common languages are going to be a little bit more of a struggle, but they go from Spanish with different dialects to Afrikaans to Portuguese, Italian, and a whole bunch of, kind of in between that. And we're continually working to, sort of improve the translation, at least, what the stable of languages are. Now, there's always a concern with language translation. I'm a bit of a language nerd on this, and it's like you might have what we will do is give you just a translation of what the word is, as opposed to really what the meaning of that is, because that's where you run into some real concerns, particularly with AI translation, because a specific word or phrase in, say, Northern Mexican Spanish might have an entirely different connotation and meaning than that same phrase in, say, Cuban Spanish or Catalan or something like that. So there is, that difference in nuance and stuff. So that's where it's going to give you the ability to get sort of the general understanding of what's going on. If you want something that's a court-ready translation, then that's when you need a qualified translator who understands a particular dialect of whichever language you are, because there's 100 different variations of just Spanish and even within English, right? It's like if I say the word boot, it has one connotation. If my friends from across the pond say it, it's automotive. So that's just something that we need to take a look at. So let's see. Is Axon going to upgrade the transcription features? Great, but a lot of errors. So yes, we continually upgrade our AI transcription tool. If you used it like 5 years ago compared to what today is, it's night and day different and significantly better. There is always, with anything that is utilizing sort of free associated recordings like body camera video, it's all going to depend on the quality of that video and the audio associated with it. So if it's garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So if you've got a lot of people talking over each other, a lot of road noise, the accuracy is going to be a little less, which is why we always put big notifications on there. This is a draft. This is not completely verified. Make sure that you're confirming that. Just trying to get through all these, and we will try to respond to these because I know we only have a couple of minutes left, and we want to be respectful of your time and as well as appreciative of APA and giving us this opportunity. Is there a sample policy for use of AI by law enforcement? Yes, there's a number of policies that are out there, and then we also worked with a third-party kind of think tank consultant to help put together some AI policies. Those are available on the Axon website, and if you reach out to either Justin or I, we're happy to get those to you as well. And then a couple of questions related to if AI is utilized either in drafting a report, augmenting a report, or doing a redaction, how is that tracked? Yes, at least within Axon, every time one of our AI tools is used, from transcription to redaction tool to draft one or any other AI tool that we have, there will be within the audit trail, there will be an indication that this is AI generated. If it's draft one, which is our police narrative tool, there will be a footer on that. This was originated with draft one. So we always want to make sure that we are being transparent and open about any use of AI, even the simple stuff like, our redaction assistant will say, here's all the license plates in this video. Do you want to redact them? Yes or no? Even that, we're going to want to make sure that that is identified and called out within the audit trail. So if there's ever any question, whether defense asks you, the court asks you, your boss asks you, you'll be able to go and tell. So we don't ever want to put something forth that's AI generated or AI assisted and say this was 100% the work of a human being. We want to make sure that that is there. And the last one, and this is probably the last one, and I'm going to kick a little bit of this over to Justin because it's kind of a technical question. And all the others that we missed, I apologize. Hopefully we'll still be able to get these. We can answer them and put them in some documentation along with the recording of this webinar. It says AI has been documented to make mistakes or errors in order to provide the user with information. What safeguards are being used to eliminate AI error or user error? And from a broad perspective is that, basically we've turned the creativity down. most of those GPTs like ChatGPT, they have a pretty high marker or high dial for creativity because that's what they're there for. They're a creative tool. Our tools are not creative tools. Our tools are, they might be generative, but they're there to make you more effective and more efficient. So we've turned that way down. Essentially, we have told the models to stick to the contents of the evidence, which dramatically reduces hallucinations in that. We do recognize AI will never be perfect, and that is why we put in as many safeguards as we can to make sure that the individuals are going through and verifying and checking that. All right,
Yeah, and then
I
just
know
on
we're
the
running out of
product
time,
side.
Justin. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and just a quick thing on the product side there. I mean, we go through. I mentioned kind of working closely with our ethics board, and they help kind of guide and shape the overall product development and some of the workflows and user interface type of improvements that need to happen. But we also do a number of extensive quantitative testing around accuracy, and we've got a really high bar for when it comes to accuracy and releasing features that aren't quite at our bar. We will keep working at it until it gets to a place where we feel like it is really, really accurate, at least in most cases. And so we have a number of mechanisms in kind of the product development process that we feel pretty good about. That when we do release AI features, they meet a really high quality bar. And just to take it back just real quick here, I know we wanted to make this at least a little bit interactive. I know we asked a lot of our respondents in the survey, and we asked you all here as well what you think are the most important. And so this is kind of your chance live in the webinar to get your vote in or to get your voice heard by Brent and I. And so we're looking at some of the live results here. So the top two things: summarizing case materials and faster evidence review, followed by translation. And so we got a couple of them maybe that are rising to the top a little bit here. I think this is generally consistent with what we see from the survey results. I think that summarizing case materials is a really interesting problem. Something that I know my team would love to sink its teeth into here, and it could be a big opportunity, as well as that faster evidence review. So appreciate everybody's participation on the webinar as we try to make this a little bit more interactive. Appreciate everybody's questions as well. And Sasha, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Justin and Brent, and to Axon for making this possible today and just sharing your insights. This is a very rapidly changing landscape, as everybody on this webinar knows. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. To our attendees, a recording of this webinar will be shared out by Axon early next week, along with the report, and it will also be made available on our YouTube channel after that. So just please keep an eye out on your inboxes for that follow-up email. It should be arriving pretty quickly. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you again to our presenters, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so
Thank you,
much for the
everybody.
time.
Yeah, appreciate it.